Welcome to the 7th episode of the Honey Pot Podcast for Sweet Conversations. I'm your host, Carmen Hendricks, and I took the lid off the pot today for another very special guest, Miss Arica Quinn. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Now, before we give you this grand introduction, I do want to let everyone know that they can find us on iTunes, on SoundCloud, and YouTube. All you have to do is search for Honey Pot Podcast and you'll find us. Today's show is sponsored by Magnolia Babies Publishing, a boutique publishing house created to introduce fresh and innovative authors to the world. Visit magnoliababiespublishing.com to purchase books, see the authors, and submit your manuscripts. Now let's introduce today's guest. She says it and she's keeping it real. She, the author, writes her myth just as we all do daily in our mind and stories we tell to each other. But she tells her story about you from your lover's identity of you. Arica is a hot mess on the planet of We're Not Ready Yet. She looks at the souls of men and women and translates what she discovers into literary works of art. She is fire and always ready to give you some truth that reflects from personal experience before trying to change you or sell you some BS you can get elsewhere. An articulate speaker, motivator, and encourager, her writing plays like your own personal soundtrack, wherever you're standing at every moment in your life. Inside your head, man and woman just enjoy the lounge, her voice, her story, and her light. Welcome, Arica. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
I'm a mother of two. I'm a grandmother of two. And just, again, excited to be on the Honey Pot with you, Miss Carmen, and ready to go all in.
Well, we are happy to have you. We are so glad that you're here today. I'm just glad to be able to be here today and have you on. So in case we have some new listeners, I want them to kind of know what's going on. We have you on here to interview with us, but we also are going to talk about some topics that are going on today. And the reason why we do that is because I believe that we all pull from things that are happening in today's life, you know, just society and what's going on, current events and news. And so we'll talk about what's going on in the news today. And then I'll ask you a few questions and how you incorporate today's events into your stories. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, so our first topic is something that's going on right now, and it's really kind of sad. Well, it's not kind of sad, it's really sad. But right now we're talking about the Amtrak derailment. They had a train that derailed in Washington State, and there were about 83 people on board. And of those 83 people, 77 have already been transported to the hospital. They have 5 people who have been listed or labeled in the red level condition, which is very, very bad. And then they have reports that there are some casualties, but they've not said how many. We've also had reports that people are going on site trying to see what's going on, which is really preventing them from doing their job. And it's just such a sad thing that's happening right now, because we haven't heard of a derailment in forever. And they're saying that it's hanging over the overpass.
Uh-huh.
So what do you think about that?
Well, first and foremost, my prayers out to every individual that was on that train. You're right. We haven't heard of a derailment in a long, long time. It will be very interesting to really see what caused that to happen and why. I'm here in Colorado and we have the light rail system, you know, and now they've got it where it goes out to the airport and everything. So kind of makes you even a little leery to get on the light rails or the trains, wherever you may be, just hearing something like that and not knowing why something like that happened. I know here in Colorado, we had a situation where a person was hit by a light rail train because the crossing thing didn't work properly. In retrospect, it's definitely a tragedy. And not to make light of the tragedy, but as you said, being an author, we kind of pull from things that are going on in the world, what an opening to a book.
Yes, yes.
And how to take that, and I mean, that could go in so many different directions. You could take that and write a book on spirituality. You could write a book on uh, fiction. You could, I mean, nonfiction. I mean, that could go in a lot of different directions. But again, my biggest thing is that I do send out prayers to those individuals and to the driver of that train, because that's got to be very traumatic.
So I'm glad that you mentioned that, the different aspects or different ways that you can go. Because like you said, our hearts do go out to those families. But then looking at it from a writing perspective, you are correct. There are so many ways that you can go with that. Now you write from several different genres, right? So
Yes.
tell us some of the genres that you've written in, and which is your favorite?
So I've done poetry, inspirational, conversational, I guess, or consciousness, and I think probably women's fiction. I'm just starting my first urban fiction, which I never saw myself writing. Wasn't something that I really even thought about doing, but an opportunity arose for me to step out and give it a try. So working on that, and probably out of all of the different genres that are out there. Probably my two favorite would be inspirational and conscious awareness. Because especially with the conscious awareness, that can be on so many different levels. It could be, like you said, making people aware of current events, or talking about, when you look at the Black Lives Matter movement, or even down to talking about certain subjects like relationships, like communication, like parenting, like whatever. So I think that's probably my favorite area, developing people's consciousness and awareness about different things, and giving people a different twist or way to look at certain things than they've looked at it before.
Okay. So you're writing urban fiction now. How is that going for you? Because that's something different. That's a completely different ball game. How are you transitioning into writing urban fiction?
Well, again, it was a challenge that was made um, to me by my publisher. Um, After looking at what was happening with the sales of those of us that are under Snow Publishing, she was concerned because she knows that we are very talented and gifted writers, but we weren't hitting the numbers that a lot of other authors were. And so she took the time to do the research and to go, what is it? What's going on? Well, the trend right now is urban fiction, street lit. That is what everybody is gravitating to. That's what everybody's picking up and reading. I mean, I even went into Walmart and saw urban fiction books for sale in Walmart. I mean, that's just how crazy this trend is right now. And so she made a challenge to us. She said, I know for some of y'all, this is going to be uncomfortable. It's going to really stretch you. But if you can give me at least one urban piece from you to put out there, she said, because where the trend is now, that's what's going to gain you the attention, and you'll be able to write whatever you want to after that.
Mhm.
And so it was a very hard decision, just because of my moral background, I guess you could say, played a part in that, and how I normally write, and how I feel about things, and how I talk. I'm not, one that walks around cussing every other sentence, or you know what I'm saying, I'm more sensual than I am erotic. And so all those things I had to work through. And one of the things that came to my memory was when I was in school for graphic design, and the challenge came up that I had to do a nude piece. The one thing that my graphic teacher said at the time was, if a company came up to you and said, we need you to do this piece, and we are going to pay you $50,000, and you got to keep a roof over your head, and you got to take care of your kids, and are you going to bypass that $50,000, or you're going to do the piece but still put you in it? He was like, just because they ask for a nude piece doesn't mean it's got to be pornographic. You know what I'm saying? And things like that. And so I kind of took the same view on doing this urban fiction piece. The great thing about it is, in writing this story, I ended up speaking with an older woman who lived the life that I'm writing about. So that kind of made the transition a little bit easier, because now it's not just a fictional story. A lot of the events in my story are based on true accounts, because she has allowed me to share her story without sharing who she is, if that makes sense. And so that's kind of helped me be able to not feel so when I say certain words or write certain scenes. But one thing I am finding is that it has stretched me, and it has showed me that I can go for it and I can do it. So that's kind of how that came about.
Now, I'm kind of glad that you said that, because when I think about urban fiction, let me tell you what my reservations have always been. There are so many people who are entering into the author arena who don't have editors, who don't have publishers, who don't really develop their stories. And they're all lumped in the urban fiction. You see so many books now that are in that genre that are on sale for 99 cents. So you've written this book and you've put your all into it. You've taken the time out to do your character development. You've taken the time out to really edit the book. You've taken the time out to tell a story from beginning to end. And then you find yourself lumped in a genre where you have so many other people who have not done the same. And so then it kind of makes people cautious, because you're a new author in that genre and people don't know you. So then they're like, well, I don't know if I want to pay for it. I don't want to buy it, or I don't want to spend 99 cents on that. And then on another end of that is, like you said, the sexual scenes, the erotic scenes. It's like people go from one extreme to another. I've read some stories and I'm like, whoa, did that really just really just read that, And so it kind of it makes me cautious, because I really truly believe in developing a story. And I don't have necessarily, in the books that I've written, I don't even have any sex scenes. That's not to say that I won't read them. I'm like you, I'm more sensual than I am erotic. It's not that I can't do it. I just don't like it. And I think it's because I too have a poetry background. And one of the things that we used to do, or that they used to say, is if you had a poem, a sex poem, they would not let you get on stage, because it's so easy to write that. It's too easy to do that. It's much harder to write a sensual poem. You know what I mean? And so I really get where you're coming from with that. So I look forward to reading your book. When it comes out, let us know.
I will.
So we can join you in the pot, All right. Okay. So now, thinking about the way that you had to go into writing urban fiction, what are some of the techniques that you utilize to write your stories?
Probably one of the biggest thing is research. So I'm a very topical writer. When the books that I've written, there is a topic or a theme of why I wrote that book. So really researching whatever that topic or that theme is about, and really learning the language, learning the background, learning the what, when, why, and how of that particular topic before I begin to write. Because then that only not helps me expand and explain through my writing, or get the message across through my writing, it also helps with the character development. For example, with, just as we're talking about the urban fiction piece that I'm writing, it's called Beauty in the Streets, A Twisted Sister's Tale. And it's the story of a young woman through her eyes. And what I found in writing that is I had to go back and tell her mother's story in order for you to really understand her story. And it caused me to have to research, because her mother was a prostitute. So I had to go and research that stuff.
Yeah.
I see prostitutes, but I don't know nothing about that
Right.
lifestyle. You know, I didn't know what the lifestyle of a pimp was like. I didn't know. So I had to go and research that information, even down to writing the few sexual scenes that are in the book, because in order to get the whole picture, it had to be played out that way. I had to go read some other erotic stuff and even look at some other erotic stuff to understand. It's one of the strategies that I use to better my writing and to make my writing realistic.
Yeah, that's how I am too. I feel like I'm all about organic. So if your story is as real as possible, it's organic, then it will read well to others. People will see, they can see it as it
Hmm.
happens. So
Right.
I agree with you on that. So let me ask you, what, after you wrote your first book, how did that change your writing process?
I think the biggest thing was realizing how to manage my time when it comes to writing. Because my first book literally took me 6 years to write.
Oh,
And it was part of it was because at first I absolutely tried to refuse to write. People ask me all the time, what inspired you? It was God that literally inspired me. He literally was like, I need you to write, and this is what I need you to write about. And so it was that whole struggle first of me. You sure you got the right one? Nobody's gonna want to hear what I gotta say. I'm not even an expert on what you want me to write about. So how am I gonna write about it? All those different kind of things I had to deal with first, and then had to deal with the fact that, oh, now I got to be transparent, because I don't know if it was for you, but for me, in order for me to get through writing the first book, I had to come out of my own experience. It took me a while just to work through all of that madness first.
mm-hmm.
And then once I got through that and I began to write, it was just life. I think a lot of people think writers just sit all day and that's all they do. The majority of us have real lives. We
Yeah.
raise kids, we got to work a job to pay bills.
Right.
We got all the same stuff that you as a reader have going on as well. So when it takes us 6 months to get the second book out, or you don't hear from us for a minute, it's because we're writing, but we are also dealing with just everyday life
Mm-hmm.
and what happens in life. And so with everything that was going on in that time, from ending up homeless to dealing with me having serious health issues, my kids having health issues, just a whole gamut of things. That's why it took so long. So one of the things that I've learned now is really scheduling that time for me to write, and scheduling time every day. Even if I know all I'm going to be able to write today is 15 minutes, but making sure that I do that 15 minutes of writing. I found out that you'd be surprised at how much you can write in 15
Right.
minutes when you set that time aside. In that, I've also had to make my family around me understand that. So they know when I come home and I say, I'm going into my writing zone, they know exactly what that means.
I don't think people understand that writing is a passion. Yes, it's a profession, but it's a passion. And when you are doing that, when you're writing, then it's no greater feeling. So let's change gears a little bit. Let's talk about some more interesting news. Carolina Panthers, the owner, Jerry Richardson, is going to sell the Panthers at the end of the 2017-2018 season because of allegations of sexual misconduct. I have a lot of feelings about it, but I'll let you talk about it first. But one thing that I wanted to mention is that Puffy has put out some information saying that he wants to put in a bid to buy them, and then he also is interested in rehiring Colin Kaepernick. So what do you think about that?
That puts a little twist on it, doesn't
Yeah.
it? um, I guess to start out, um, we have to be aware that they're allegations, and they're not allegations that have been proven. But if you feel like you need to step down, to me, you're kind of admitting guilt, like automatic. guilt, because why would you give up something that obviously is very valuable to you?
I want to say that he is one of the few owners that originally started that franchise. So that's rare that they would sell, that he would sell. So I agree with you on that.
Right. So to me, you just pretty much admitted your guilt. Now the fact that Huffy says he wants to buy it, don't know how that's gonna play out.
Yeah.
But I'm sure he's not gonna be the only one that's gonna come up and say they want to purchase the team that's, in other entertainment industries or spotlights. I'm sure he's not. That's one of those things we just have to kind of sit back and just kind of watch and see what's happening. We put Trump in the White House, so crazy things can happen. That's all I'm gonna say.
So I'm glad that you mentioned Trump, because that's one of the things that concerns me as well. We have this situation. We have the Fox situation with Tamara Holder, which I'll talk about in just a moment. And then we have the rape allegation from the young man in Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
And we have all of these people who are being held accountable for their actions.
And I know exactly what you're about to say.
Yeah, okay, so we have all of these people that are being held accountable for their actions, but then we have these allegations that have come across in regard to Trump, and nothing has happened. He has not stepped down. He is not, nothing has happened. And these are not new allegations. These are things that have been brought to light before. There was a young lady that did an interview who initially brought allegations out against him in 2005. She worked in one of his buildings. And what she said was that he forcibly kissed her. She said he kept kissing her on her cheek. He was holding her hand, shaking her hand. He kept kissing her on her cheek. And then he just kissed her. And, thinking about that, thinking about him and the statement that he made about grabbing them in their private parts and those types of things, that there's something, again, where there is smoke, there's fire. So why is everyone always making these excuses for him and not attempting to try to push him aside when we have heads of companies and all of these people that are being pushed aside for misconduct? That is, the POTUS held at a different standard, What do you think about that?
It's a smokescreen.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that even down to what happened with Kaepernick and the kneeling at the national anthem.
Mm-hmm.
It had nothing to do with the flag. It had nothing to do with being American. He was making his own statement, but they blew it up so that we as Americans would focus on that. So all the little dirty stuff that goes on in the White House and the politics and all that stuff could keep going on. I believe it's the same thing. So you're bringing all these allegations against all these other people. All this stuff is coming up so that the focus is off of Trump and what he's doing and over here. It's all a smokescreen to get us not to pay attention to what really is going on. Because if you really look back at everything, Trump is not under allegation. Trump, there is proof. There is video proof. There is verbal proof. There is his own statement proof. So his isn't an allegation. His is a fact. Mm-hmm. But in order to keep America off of Trump, then all the real stuff, see, even that's not even the issue. To me, that's why all of these allegations and all these things that are coming out are so heightened. Because if we can turn America's attention over here, then we don't have to explain what's going on over here.
They're changing the narrative. And it's frustrating because with the whole situation with Kaepernick, he really just started out sitting. He was sitting. And a veteran said that he felt that there was something wrong with that. He felt like it was a snub to him as a veteran. And so Colin had a conversation with him and they talked about it. And so he told him, he asked him, what is it that you think that I should do? And he said, well, kneeling would be a better option. And that's why Colin Kaepernick started kneeling. It had nothing to do with the flag ever. And it makes me mad because we as Black people, we have these fights all the time because we are just trying to let people know that we are human, we matter. And it's like, oh, well, all lives matter. We never said all lives didn't matter. We said Black lives matter because all lives are not being killed at these alarming rates by police officers. Black lives are being killed at these alarming rates.
Mm-hmm.
Black people are the ones who, you see, I talked about this on an earlier show, Walter Scott's situation where he was shot in the back 8 times by Michael Slager. Well, he had a hung jury, but they tried him. He was convicted of violating Walter Scott's civil rights.
Mm-hmm.
So he ended up getting 20 years in jail. Well, you only got 20 years, but you took this man's life. And then not only did you take this man's life, you shot him in the back 8 times. You lied on your report. You said he attempted to attack you. He was running away. And had it not been for that camera footage from a bystander, we would have never known the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the things that bother me. And it's like you try to tell people that and they don't see it. It's so often that I had a conversation with this young lady. Actually, it was on Facebook, and I was responding to a friend of mine's post. And I don't even remember what it was, but it was something about what was going on with the Black Lives Matter movement. And it was a white lady, and she was trying to tell me about my experience. Well, you can't tell me about something that you've never gone through. You can't tell me about my experience, you know? There have been situations where I was pulled over once. I actually was at a gas station. I really wasn't bothering anybody. I was sitting at the gas station getting ready to get some gas. I guess I was sitting in the car too long before I got out. This police lady, it was a lady, she drove up. She came over. She started harassing me. I had gotten out the car. She patted me down, but she didn't pat me down like, she was looking for something. I was being violated. And that's not the first time that has happened. But if you've never experienced that, you can't tell me my experience.
Exactly.
And so it makes me mad when people try to tell me that I'm not supposed to say that Black lives matter because all lives matter, because all lives don't have the same experience that Black lives do. That's just the way I feel about that. I'm sorry I got a little passionate.
That's all right.
It makes me mad. When you see this poor man has lost a job because he stood up for something that he believed in. And if you don't stand up for something, we hear this all the time. If you don't stand up for something, you're going to fall for nothing. I'm not falling for this narrative that you all keep trying to shove down my throat because you want me to forget what's going on in the Black community.
I totally feel you. I mean, I've even had experiences where I've gotten pulled over and literally was scared to death, and was pretty much yelled at by the police because I didn't stop right away. Well, I was not getting ready to stop where it was dark and could nobody see me, and I couldn't scream for help or anything if I needed to after what I've seen, because it's not just men, it's women that are losing their lives. It's Black women that are being yanked out of their cars by their hair and by their wrists and thrown and kicked on the ground. And if you thought for 1 minute I was going to stop where it was dark and couldn't nobody see nothing, you was crazy. And so when I did finally stop, the first thing they started yelling was I was trying to elude them. I didn't elude anybody. I slowed down. I was going about 20 miles an hour down the street till I got to a lit public place. And then I pulled over. I turned off my car. I even took my keys out of the ignition and put them on the dashboard. So you couldn't say I was eluding. I was trying to keep myself safe in an unsafe environment. And so when you go back to saying, white people don't have to deal with that. They don't have to feel like they got to pull into a safe place. They don't have to make sure that they got their hands way up above, trying to put them outside the window so they can be seen. They don't have to do all of that. Mm-hmm. They really don't. When you say you cannot tell me my story.
That's right.
Now, I've been in a car where I was driving, and I've had some of my white friends in the car with me, and we got pulled over. Now, they can talk about what they saw.
Mm-hmm.
They can talk about how they seen how I felt.
Mm-hmm.
All of that kind of thing. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was one time I got pulled over, and it was me, my son, and his fiance. And they were pretty much getting ready to harass my child. The police were. But I honestly believe the only reason they didn't was because his fiance was sitting in the back seat, who happens to be mixed, but she looks more white than anything else.
Oh.
And I believe that is the only reason that they did not harass my son, because she was sitting in the back seat with the baby. And so they begin to ask questions. Well, why are you asking who's in my car? What does that concern you? Let's talk about why you pulled me over. Yeah, I totally agree with you. So I understand. And like you said, it's not that we don't think all lives matter, because all lives do matter. But like you said, it's Black lives that are having the issue.
You can't get it if it's not a part of your life, if it's nothing that you've experienced. It's like
Right.
what you were saying, when you're writing, you had to do a lot of research. Brothers, we live in a society of lazy people who are not going to do research to really understand the experience,
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just at a point where I feel like, I write about it. Do you write about it? Do you put these stories within your novels?
With a lot of the stuff that's been going on now, I have, as an author, you always have a title or an idea that's kind of sitting over there waiting for you to get to it. So
Mm-hmm.
I've got some stuff sitting over there. I just haven't gotten to it yet.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's talk about, since we brought it up earlier, let's talk about Tamara Holder and the whole Fox situation and what Rupert Murdoch said. So Rupert Murdoch called the allegations nonsense. He did an interview recently stating that the executive was out. Initially, he said hours, and then he said days, but it came to light that Roger Ailes is the executive that they were speaking of, and it took 2 weeks for them to let him go. Tamara Holder is one of the accusers. She's a former sexual accuser who settled out of court. As a part of her court settlement, she was not able to talk about the incident. She can't apply for any jobs that are owned by the Fox network, which is unfortunate because now she's out of a job. But she's able to come forward because part of her settlement was that she could speak out if there were some disparaging remarks. And this is a disparaging remark to say that it's nonsense. So I wanted to play the clip and let you talk about it. I want you to hear it first.
Harmful as the whole raft of allegations about sexual harassment at Fox News been for the business? That's some nonsense. There was a problem with our chief executive, over the years, but in isolated instance. As soon as we investigated, he was out of the place in hours. Well, 3 or 4 days. There's been nothing else since then. Now, of course, but that was largely political because we're conservative. Now, of course, all the liberals are going down the drain. NBC's in deep trouble. CBS, their stars. I think it's a very interesting sector we can go to and make it for it. There are really bad cases that people should be moved aside, and there are other things. But did it probably amount to a bit of flirting,
I would not have been able to be sitting here to say what I'm about to say if it wasn't for Mr. Murdoch and what he said. Because my settlement, in exchange for money, I had to agree to be quiet, except if I was disparaged or maligned. And because Mr. Murdoch said what he said, that 60 seconds has allowed me to speak out.
Yeah, and then I heard him say that within 3 or 4 days they fired Roger Ailes. That's not true. It took at least 2 weeks.
Well, right. Well, let's just start with it. I'll make this really fast. He said it was all nonsense. Okay. Yeah. He ruined Fox News, ruined people's lives. He ruined my life. I don't have a job in TV anymore because the place that he has secured down, like Fort Knox, allowed abusive predators to prey on women who just wanted to work. That is not nonsense. This is people's lives. He says that there were cases that amounted to flirting. Let me be clear. I had a man pull out his penis in his office and shove my head on it. That was not flirting. That was criminal.
Now that we have seen the nonsense and the clip, we can really discuss it. Now, I know that this will make for some great news. I mean, some great literature, great reading, something that we could put in our books. I know it. But this angers me as well.
Mm-hmm.
For you to say flirting, when this is not flirting, to push someone's head onto your private parts, that is assault.
Yes, it is.
What are your thoughts?
I'm probably going to have a lot of people upset at me when I say this. There is a such thing as white privilege and white entitlement that, for whatever reason, makes it okay to do such behaviors. Now, had that been, unfortunately, a Hispanic man, Black man, even an Asian man, they'd have been burned at the stake so fast, we wouldn't even have time to ask a question. How do you allow someone to still get over by telling someone, obviously they know they were wrong because they settled out of court, right?
Right.
Okay. Because most people don't settle out of court unless they trying to, okay, let's just get this over with. We admit our wrong to it. Let's do what we need to do. But then to put in a stipulation that she couldn't say anything unless something wrong that would incite her to be able to say something. See, that's that entitlement.
But
That's
then for him to say, oh, well, it was political and, but the liberals are in trouble too. That one doesn't have anything to do with the other.
Another. Sexual assault has nothing to do with politics. What does that have to do with politics? So you telling me that if my boss decides to make a move on me and I feel uncomfortable and I say it's sexual harassment, then all of a sudden it's because I'm a Democrat? What sense does that make? That doesn't even make any sense. It sounds stupid just to say it. I mean, I'm sorry, but I'm glad he slipped up because I'm glad she's able to tell her whole story now. Because guarantee you, because she couldn't tell the whole story, people yet are looking at her like she was just out for the money. It had nothing to do with money. That was their way of shutting her up.
Mm-hmm.
But it had nothing to do with money for her. It had to do with, I'm going to stop it right here, right now. And this is not going any further. This is not going to happen to another woman who comes behind me. I believe that's what this was about for her.
She said that there are other women who experienced it that can't come out. So yes, she's acting as their voice. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that she is able to come out and act as their voice. And I'm wondering if they had the same clause that she had and if they can come out. Because she said that they had to talk her into coming forward. But to tell me that I can't even apply for another job for Fox, and that's something that she did, that was her job, that's what she loved, to say that, they had to have offered her a huge settlement.
Very huge. Mm-hmm. Extremely huge, which only personifies your guilt. If it is alleged that I had done something and I know full well that I didn't do it, I'm not getting ready to pay you to say I didn't do it.
And shush you.
We're going to fight this thing out.
Social media has played a major part in these types of allegations coming to light, these things coming out, being able to have a camera and recording what's going on. But, now they're trying to make it illegal for people to record on their camera phones, which is unfortunate because had it not been for some of that footage, we would not have ever known what really happened in a lot of instances because, there would not have been any evidence. So,
isn't that interesting? You're going to make it illegal for people to record on their camera phones, but you just put in effect that police officers got to have on body cameras. So you know how easy it is to take footage and manipulate footage with technology today? So now, there you go. We back to square one, because though they might have on their body camera, they can easily go back and mess with that footage and make it look like they want it to look.
You know, there's a young man, a little boy, who created some software, an app, that when you are pulled over, you turn the app on and it records everything, that whole conversation, the entire interaction. And then as soon as you stop it, it sends the interaction all off somewhere so that it cannot be manipulated. I'm going to have to find out the name of that young man and that app so that we can talk about it later on.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I can find it, I'll put the information in the description for this video. But it's sad that we even have to have something like that in place, because we know that there's a possibility that they may tamper with the footage. You know, it's really sad.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really sad. And then that makes me think about this young lady in Oklahoma. So let's go ahead and talk about her.
Okay.
Courtney Jean Thornton. She falsely accused Oklahoma University running back Rodney Anderson of rape because he would not date her. The story goes that she accused him after he stopped returning her phone calls and her text messages. She accused him of rape. Her initial allegation had holes in the story, so they started investigating and asking some friends who stated that she was bragging about her relationship with him. She was bragging about having sex with him. And no one ever had any indication that he raped her. And then there were also text messages that she sent to him where they communicated back and forth, where she never said or alluded to any type of rape. She never said no. There's no evidence that he raped her, and because of those testimonies and because of those text messages, he was able to get off. Now, here's what bothers me with this: when you accuse someone of rape, it's very damaging, and it leads to them having a stigma around them and around their name forever, because they've had that allegation. Even if it's not true, there's still always going to be that stigma there. And if someone else decides to come along 2-3 years later and say that they've been raped, they're going to always go back to, well, he was accused 2 or 3 years prior, or, you know. So that's one aspect of it. Another aspect is I'm tired of people getting away with it, because for those of us who are real victims, it makes it difficult, because it's already a hard decision to come forward. And it's already a hard decision to go through it, because you have all of these questions about, well, you know, what did you do? What did you say? What did you wear? What did you do to provoke it? You know, you're always, as the accuser, you're still looked at as being guilty or causing it in some way. So to have someone who was not a victim come forward, it diminishes all of those who truly have gone through it. As an accuser, they decided not to prosecute her. When we have these accusers who come forward and falsely accuse people of rape, it is disturbing, because you have affected this person's life. Why are you not going to jail behind that? Why are you not being, there should be some type of penalty.
I'm feeling the same way on both of your issues. I agree. There should be some type of penalty delegated, and there never has been. And I think that's why it's so easy for people to do that type of thing, because they feel like I can do it and get away with it, and nothing's going to happen to me. I think if there was something that would happen to them, we'd have less people falsely accusing people of stuff that they didn't do. These things have literally happened to them. Nobody wants to believe them because of all the lying women or men, because men do it too, and falsely accuse that someone has done something to them as well. it affects the outcome. And so there are, I believe, a lot of pedophiles and different things like that that are on the streets that shouldn't be, simply because they got away with it because nobody believed the person that was saying it happened to, because of all the false allegations that other people have made in regards to that same type of crime. Two, like you said, his name is jacked up for the rest of his life. I don't care where he goes. I don't care what he tries to do. That is always going to follow him. You know, things become permanent on your record. But when it is found that someone has been falsely accused of someone and it is proven, that needs to be automatically expunged from their record, never to be able to be used against them again. Because you're right. What they do is they go, well, 10 years ago, it was alleged that he did such and such and such and such. Shouldn't be able to do that. Should not be able to do that. So yes, he walks around with that stigma for the rest of his life. And can you imagine having to explain that to your children? Something needs to be done. She needs to receive some type of punishment for what she did. That is not okay. And you just get to walk away like nothing ever happened and continue your life? No, that's not okay at all whatsoever.
So if you were to write a story with this type of scenario, how would you approach it?
It would probably be something like, I would title it The Victorious Victim. And I would take it from the spin of him and how he was able to take what happened to him and become a victor, because maybe he was able to get some laws that penalize people who did exactly what she did. You know what I'm saying? So I would take it from that point of view of how you are victimized by someone else, but how you can yet become victorious.
So let's talk about our last topic, and that's Tiffany Haddish. She has her memoir, The Last Unicorn, and it has been brought to our attention that in her last edit, that some of her stories were changed and embellished a little bit, and even to the point where her ex-husband has come forward and said that he did not abuse her in the way that was identified in the book, and she has corroborated that. In this type of situation, how would you handle it if you had a book and it was edited and you did not get a chance to read those last edits and you saw changes in that way? How would you handle it?
Well, first and foremost, she has a lawsuit against whoever the editing company or publishing company is to put that out like that, because as an author, that is your work. You have a right to look over everything before it goes to be published or to be put out. And if you don't, then you need to be checking your contract. Because should nothing you put out there that has your name on it go out without your final approval, she should not be held accountable for that. Those who did that should be the ones that are held accountable for that. She should also be given free right, free liberty, without question, to go back, modify, and fix what was wrong.
Well, it says that she recently explained on social media to her followers that unbeknownst to her, that some of the stories were exaggerated for writing effect. But she says that in the audio books, she clarifies those stories in her own words, because she is the voice on the audio books. So she does have the opportunity, or she did have the opportunity, to go back and make those corrections. So that leaves me to my last question, which is the question that I ask everyone. And I want you to tell my listeners and our viewers what literary success means to you.
My most important thing to me about literary success is that I've left an impact. I've left a mark. I've said something to change someone's life, or maybe I've said something that spurred a movement, or maybe I've said something that encouraged somebody or impacted in a positive way, that when I'm dead and gone, the legacy that I left behind because of my writing has not tainted my children and my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren, but it's left them something that they can be proud of, and they can say, yeah, that was my grandmama.
That's awesome. It's great that you feel that way. We always want to make sure that if we can just touch one life, that we've had that impact on one life, that we've achieved the success. And so I agree with that. So we've reached the segment, What's in the Honey Pot? And this is where I reach into the pot and find something new, fresh, some kind of music that people are not quite privy to yet. And so I want to talk about Chanté Moore. She has a new Christmas album that's out. And since it's December, it's Christmas, it's the most wonderful time of the year. It's when people are the nicest. I was talking about this the other day that I don't know, I have a thing. I like Christmas movies. I know they're cheesy, but I love them because they you know, you don't have to deal with death and fighting and arguing. It's really all about love and spreading some type of happiness. And I think that's why I like them. And so I just want to point out that Chanté Moore does have a Christmas album. So that's something new for everyone. So what's on your music playlist now?
I think the last thing I listened to was some James Brown and Aretha Franklin. I'm very old school.
Okay.
I like real music.
I see. Respect. Put some respect on my name.
So I think that's the last thing I listened to was some James Brown and some Aretha Franklin. Gosh, even if I think about my playlist, I have more old school jazz and gospel. That's pretty much what sums up my playlist.
Well, thank you so much for coming onto the show. Before we end it, do you have any last words?
I would just say this. If there's anybody out there that is aspiring to be an author or inspiring to write, the biggest thing I can tell you is just do it. Don't worry about the naysayers. Don't worry about what people might feel or think. If their passion is in you to write something, just write it. And when I say just write it, I don't mean don't worry about if you spelled right. Don't worry about if you use correct grammar. Don't worry about if your character development is right. Just get it on the paper. Get it from your head to your heart so that it becomes a passion, and then just write it.
That is in line with my Carmenism for today. Because it's about making decisions, and you saying deciding to write it and getting it on paper. My Carmenism is that decisions are sometimes difficult to make, but they are necessary. Take charge of your life. It starts with you. Mm-hmm. So that's perfect, because making the decision to write, and I like how you put that, move it from your mind to your heart so that it becomes your passion, and then from your heart to the paper. That's awesome. I really like that. Okay, well, tell people how they can find you on social media, and do you have a website?
I do. So as far as social media is concerned, I'm on Twitter under my pen name, which is AriQui, AriQui. The same on Instagram. On Facebook, I am under, you can find me under my personal page, which is Arica, AriCaQuinn. Also, AriQuiBook Club, which is AriQui, and then Book Club, and then author Arica Quinn, AriQui Books. So that's how you can find me on social media. And then, so those are the way. And then you can always email me at ariquibooks@gmail.com. And that's AriQui books@gmail.com.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining. We really appreciate having you here in the pot. And thank you guys for taking the time out to visit us in the pot at the Honey Pot Podcast. I'm your host, Carmen Hendricks. You can also find me at carmenhendricks.com. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and like us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram using the handle @Honeypot Podcast. That does it for today. I'm putting the lid back on the pot. Thank you, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.